Oscar Wilde said, "Experience is the hardest kind of teacher. It gives you the test first and the lesson afterwards." So when we talk about experience, I think we have a little experience on this dais here. And counting myself, I think we're almost around 100 years of experience. Wow, and travel.
Keep going.
And we keep going, that's right. We're not going to stop now. So with all that experience, and thank you all, pundits, founders, bloggers, luminaries that we have on stage, with all that experience, if you can go back in time to when you started, whether or not that was the mid-90s, whenever that was, year 2000, and you can go back in time knowing what you know now, what would you say to the industry? Rod?
Well, I would say, believe me when I tell you that the experiences market is going to be big, because nobody did until about, 2010 or something like that. It was just a really hard slog, and now it's a really important sector, and there's lots of money flowing into it, and everybody's on board. But we spent an awful lot of time banging our heads against walls, trying to get people to understand that booking activities in advance was a thing.
That online was a thing. The internet was a thing.
Yep, indeed.
And it took a long time for that to happen. It did. For
Well,
travel,
the industry, I think it has its hierarchy. It always used to be flights, hotels, car rental, cruises, and then other stuff. I guess now it's hotels, flights, car rentals, activities. I'm not sure what the order is now, but it's definitely changed
hotels
a
have
lot.
risen up somehow, and algorithm there, right? And Tim?
I suppose my big advice back 20 years ago is that the plumbing is still really bad. And 20 years later, the plumbing is still really bad. You and I were joking about it. Allotment rejects are still a thing here in 2022. Cancelled bookings are still a thing. Overbookings are still a thing. Confusing bookings are still a thing. How is it, after 20 years of technological revolution, we have still not got the plumbing right? And I would love to go back to 20 years' time when people putting the first booking screens on top of the GDS and said, let's get back to the plumbing and try and fix that. Because, take also the classic example of someone who we hand over a booking to a hotel, and all of the information about that customer disappears, goes into the ether, and the hotel starts with a blank, fresh slate of this view of this customer. The customer's requests and needs and data and view just disappears, and yet we're 22 plus years into this thing. So I'd love to go back to 20 years ago and fix the plumbing. Yeah.
That's a tough one, though.
It's like,
We're
here we
still
are.
starting to do it.
Yeah.
I know. Timothy?
Oh gosh, you really picked me.
One thing.
Okay, so I would start with saying to people, this is not America. And the reason for that is that we used America as the model and the example. The second thing I think I'd probably say is, don't think airport to airport, station to station, think couch to couch. It's very important that people understand that there is an entirety to the journey. And I think we forgot that very early on because we were so keen to get something out there as quickly as possible. I think the third thing that I would add is something that I learned when I went to Microsoft on the founding team for Expedia was learn to expect changes. And everybody has got a right and a responsibility to be a hero. And I think those are two things that I really learned very, very well.
And it's interesting what you said about don't follow America.
Yep.
Okay, what do you think Europe did wrong there?
I think it was an easy way out that initially people didn't quite know if America was the right model. America got the internet right sooner than anybody else did. But that didn't mean that people weren't actually going down separate paths and the right paths. And I think the American model of the internet probably has harmed more of the individualism of the internet than anything else. And we only really have two, well, maybe three if you count Russia now. We only have two models, which is the Chinese model and the American model.
When we see that in mobile in Asia, right, where everybody got the phone, they went, let's go crazy with this, right? Whereas the rest of the world, like America and Europe, sort of stayed a little bit slower on the phone. So I'd have these interesting meetings where I would sit down with somebody and say, here is the percentage of Agoda's business on the phone. And the Americans looked at me like, that's incredible. And the Chinese look at me like, that's just ridiculous. Like, because we're kind of somewhere in between of this kind of like mobile revolution. So I think, that's a big part of this as well, yeah.
So pandemic, right? And we thought the industry was going to learn something from it, hopefully something come out of it, whether or not it's more responsibility to the environment, more responsibility to each other, to how we all work together, and destinations as well, really rethinking, how many visitors do I really want? And yet it kind of seems like we're back to where we started. Have we learned anything from the pandemic?
I was thinking about this just yesterday, so I think there is something I can say on this topic that's relevant, and that's that we've realized how much people really do want to travel. Their desire to travel is unending. And we can pair that now with another finding, I think, which is that the elasticity of price is a really interesting thing. I mean, I know myself, I paid a ridiculous amount of money to get on a plane to come here. And it didn't bother me at all. And I know other people are thinking the same way. Whether it's that they're thinking, well, I've got 2 years of travel budget that I can apply to this year, or just travel is worth more to me than I previously calculated it to be.
But is it becoming more exclusive? I mean, we want it to be, these open borders and people traveling internationally for the first time, and we saw that happen, especially in Asia. Yeah. And now is it going to be a little more of an exclusive type of deal to travel?
I don't think it's exclusive, because we saw in Asia was extraordinary, where markets would turn off and on overnight, right? So the Koreans would go into lockdown, the Vietnamese would come out of lockdown, the Indonesians would come out of lockdown, the Taiwanese would go into lockdown. And every time travel turned on and off instantly, like not just a little bit, like instantaneously. And that was at all levels of price point. So I think we've proven that, the cream can rise to the top here on travel, and anybody who gets a chance to travel is going to do it. But I'm worried that we're going to kiss goodbye to a chance to make sustainability a big thing here. We all talked about it. We all hoped for it. We saw pictures of Thailand beaches with no tourists on it and went, oh my God, that's amazing. But I fear that we're sort of like, I don't know, getting in the red Corvette, pouring it full of petrol and just charging ahead like sustainability is not a question anymore. So I'm worried we've missed the chance to grab the post-COVID
and whose
sustainability.
responsibility is that?
I think it's all of us. I mean, the travel industry is a bit, but it's also just consumers, it's government, it's tourism operators, it's tourism authorities. I can speak more to Thailand than I can to the Costa Brava, but in Thailand, they had real chances to grab hold of beaches and start to control the numbers of visitors, and they didn't really take that chance.
The red Corvette was a very nice image there, Tim. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I think there's one thing that there's a big lie out here. The big lie is net zero 2050 is a lie. That's my one big prediction. It's not going to happen. The whole travel industry, the aviation industry in particular, is not going to be able to do that.
I'm going to come back in 2050 and call you on that one.
You will absolutely do that, and I will be around, Lorraine. I promise you I will be around. Today you can quote me on that. I think you look, there's a certain amount of greenwashing that's going on. The challenge with sustainability is that it is at the forefront, but we've made some bad decisions early on, and we're continuing to make bad decisions now. One of those bad decisions is the abolition of very large aircraft. We need to have travel for all the reasons we all know, everybody here knows. But I think the challenge is now how to keep travel in the face of these counter of the sustainability. So the Dutch government yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, announced that they're going to cut Schiphol flights by 20% on November 2023. That's next year, 20% cut in flights. What's that going to do to this country? These are the sort of things that we now need to stay here and understand that.
I think with only a few minutes left, unfortunately, we're not going to solve a lot of these problems.
You can catch us afterwards.
But we can solve them afterwards, certainly, in the exhibit hall. But I think we should bring them up, and then I think that's at least a good start. So what is the biggest gap in the industry right now? And, you know, I think you kind of alluded to it. Like, we still haven't solved. We're still a bunch of silos, the industry.
Actually, I've got a different gap, and there might be a bit of controversy in this. And there's a gap between data and insight, right? We are sitting on so much data. Everyone goes, data, 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 data. And we are pushing this data out to consumers without insight. And I'll give you my personal example. I typed in to a major meta search engine, Sydney to Milan, return, business class. And I sorted it by cheapest. And sucking all this data, this meta search company gave me a 51-hour trip. Right, 51-hour trip, but it was the cheapest. The second cheapest was 82 hours, right? And it involved flying Sydney to Melbourne in Jetstar, so not even business class, and a 14-hour layover before heading to the Middle East. So this company, and we're all guilty of this, have sucked in this data and said, we're just about data, we're just about data, we're just about data, but they're not doing the insight part. And I think the big pundit call for what we have to do now is the insight part. We have to build the products that take the data that says an 81-hour flight, even if it's the cheapest, is not viable.
Okay.
I think it's easy, though, to you know, pour scorn on the industry and say we're not getting better, but we are. It's like a complex industry, and you go out to the airport and you get on your flight, and it's really, you know, things do work. Now, is it rough around the edges? Yes. Was Heathrow Terminal 2 a complete, you know, dog's breakfast the other day? Yes. Is it better now? Yes. So I think, you know, collectively, we here in the industry, we do wonderful work, and a day in the life of the travel industry is, you know, it's a whole lot of technology coming together to do wonderful things. So I don't think we should feel bad about the fact that it's...
No, we're not saying it's broken. We're all here. We all made it here. But it could be better.
It's just like these guys are they're negative. They're known for that. I want to have like a positive message going out into the industry.
Okay, that's good.
Well, if you want one place where I think it is broken, it is the airport. Everybody's seen it. It's that transit point. If train stations can get it done faster, why can't airports get it done faster? So it's going to be the biggest constraint going forward, because you take the top 200 airports in the world, I believe 95% of them are slot constrained today, and they're not moving enough passengers in there. So I think we need to solve the airport problem big time.
We had the amazing situation in Australia where around Christmas time, it was chaos at the airports, and the chief executive of Qantas had the audacity to say that it was travellers who had forgotten how to travel that were causing the problems.
It's all your fault.
And you got slammed for
Yeah,
that.
so travelers are so demanding. Are we entering an age, though, where the traveler is going to be a little more centric, right? Because instead of suppliers, are we moving back toward, we need to care about the traveler. We need to care about the consumer, about what they want.
I wish that that was the case, but I think it needs some help. And that help is only going to come from the government in the form of consumer protection. We as a traveling public, as opposed to those people who work in the industry, we have let that obligation to the consumer slip us by. The airlines, hotels, almost everybody has hid behind the pandemic saying, isn't it great? I'm so sorry, but you know what? Your flight's canceled and you can't get on another one for 10 weeks. Tough. I think this is going to rear its head. Canada just enacted some new legislation in the subject, which is more akin to the European one. And if the US doesn't do it in the next 2 years, we are in big trouble.
I'm really positive about the industry, the industry's ability to come together to work these things out. I think we see, and Phocuswright has played a big part in that, in this, and I want to give Phocuswright its due. Promoting innovative young companies who, you know, look into the future and see things. I think we've got Kat Jones from Byways going to be up. You know, they do flight-free holidays, and out of the UK into Europe, and it's going gangbusters because consumers, you know, at a personal level, want to attack those problems. And the industry's going to see that, and they're going to say, well, those guys are doing well, we need to adopt that sort of thinking.
I'm hopeful too, because I'm hopeful that COVID shined a light on the cancellation policy sort of story of travel, which sort of had fully flexible and absolutely nothing. And I think hopefully COVID shined a light. The consumers are in a spectrum of wanting patterns of different options, and they'll pay for it, and they'll move their bodies around to do different cancellations options. I'm hoping that light will shine, and this time next year we'll be seeing all sorts of different and creative ways to have different ranges of cancellation.
I mean, you're right, and you bring up a really good point, because we have these startup companies, we have innovators, but are we in an environment now where we're a little concerned about some of the funding for these companies, because funding is really tight, and is that going to impact innovation?
I think it's going to be a very difficult thing. We're kind of at the long tail of where innovation, traditional innovation that we've known for the past 20 years is. I think we're going to see a lot of innovation. When Tamara was up here on the stage for Swiss, he was talking about fintech. And I believe that fintech is the last big area that really needs revolution, and we're going to see that. But I also think that this issue, Tim was talking about insight, I think what Hopper is doing is very interesting, because finally somebody is taken, and I think Forward Keys is in the audience as well, you're looking at people who are actually making data meaningful, and the insight is actually flowing. Yes. So I think that the use of data, and I'm going to misquote Mr. Hughes here, but you don't just give it to the customer and say, here's data, go use it, because they're not going to be able to. You know, something in the air, great. I can't figure that stuff out. You need to give something that gives them the ability to make a decision. I think we've made the whole decision-making process far more complex than it needs to be. We need to simplify, I've got a good word which is called decomplexify, how we go about the sales process. We've made it far too hard.
And in Asia, you know, money has just been swirling around for the last decade, right? You've seen, not just in travel, you've seen enormous amounts of money raised by travel. Travelocus has raised $1.2, $1.4 billion, but all sorts of other people have raised enormous amounts of money. And this last 9-month period in the SPAC IPO market has shown how big a problem that was, right? You're probably all aware of what's going on in Europe and America, but these companies, Coupang, Paytm, Kakao Pay, Bukalapak, are major, large e-commerce Asian or fintech companies that are worth less than 60% less than they were when they SPAC'd or IPO'd just this year. And these companies all raised $1 billion. Gojek is another one, Grab is another one. So hopefully, we hope that can create some calm in this crazy fundraising that was the story of 2019 and before, and allow companies like us who are focused on profitability and normal growth to have a little bit more oxygen. So here's a hope for that. Yeah. Okay.
Gosh, that sounds like old age speaking, doesn't it?
So let's go to the other end now. So consolidation in terms of distribution has created really two giants, or three. One of them is your parent company, Booking, of course. You have Expedia and Trip.com. Really representing maybe more than 3/4 of the OTA marketplace globally. And the question is, who's the challenger? We thought maybe one day would be Amazon. We thought it would, Google would be, doing transactions. You mentioned Hopper, of course. Who's the big challenger? Is there somebody challenging?
I don't think there is a challenger, frankly. The only challenger that you're likely to see is going to be coming from China, coming into the non-Chinese world. Because the other direction's not going to happen anymore. How many times have the West trying to take places to China? It didn't work. I think China's the only possible source, and I really think that the two OTAs, it's kind of game over.
It's interesting because in Asia, in our part of the world, COVID gave life to the local players who focused on domestic markets. So Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Indonesia, those players who were, you thought, under pressure from the outside internationals, all said, oh, we own the local customer, oh, we own the local supply, and they had some of the best years of their life. So there are companies in Asia where 2021 was the best year in their history because they were domestically focused. So yeah, the challenges are back, yeah.
Rod, you're not going to get away with this one?
I think it's hard to disagree. Booking and Expedia, Ctrip have just grown. It's like the physics of something that's got a lot of mass. Their ability to suck customers into their world. It's just it's hard to fight against.
That's not going to stop.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so no big challengers. Amazing.
No. Well, Google have figured out a way to be a challenger without doing what the other guys do. They just take the cream off the top. Yeah. Don't get me started on that.
Maybe there is one. And it's because we don't notice it. It's Amazon has become such a massive player because of AWS. It's not Amazon the brand, it's Amazon the data pipes. And that has become something that really has impacted all of
Yeah,
us.
very good point. So we're just going to end with a lightning round. And what I did was, since, buzzwords, right? We've all lived through so many buzzwords, and we've seen them come and go, but they keep coming back. So I just picked a few. And if you could just think of maybe one or two words when I do this buzzword, and we'll go in this way. So big data.
Relevant.
It needs insight.
Deep.
Blockchain.
Irrelevant.
Haven't seen it work and travel.
It's got a lot of issues with it.
Connected trip.
Not as important as, well, there's too many words already.
Okay, that's okay.
All in.
It'll happen, but not as we know it, Jim.
Okay. Disintermediation.
That's a really long word.
Remember that one?
Don't even think about it.
What's to disintermediate?
Frictionless.
Should be every company's target.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope.
I would just put hope.
Hope. I like agree.
NDC, one order.
What?
Who?
Leisure.
Oh, yeah. I love it. As a consumer, I love it.
Sorry, what was the word?
Leisure.
Leisure.
My trip is a conference for 3 days and 21 days of leisure.
Yeah.
So
21 days.
definitely
Me
Yeah.
too. I'm half and half
We'll
on this
love
trip.
leisure.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
SPACs.
Oh boy. Blood bath.
Blood, yeah. Blood on the tracks.
And finally, metaverse.
No, okay.
What a joke.
Don't care. Too old, no hair, don't care.
There you go, 100 years of experience. Rod, Tim, Timothy, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lorraine. Nice one.